The galaxy was full of wonders, some beautiful, others dark and foreboding. The planet of Drathis was one of the latter. Once a flourishing hub of trade, the world had long since fallen into chaos. Its once great cities lay in ruin, and its people, a hardy species of green-skinned aliens called the Vekr, were now scattered, living in makeshift camps and broken-down structures. Resource wars had drained the planet of everything, and what little remained was often hoarded by the powerful. Those who were left had to fight for scraps. For Ethan Carter, a human soldier stranded on Drathis, survival had become a day-to-day struggle. He had arrived on the planet after his ship was struck by a rogue asteroid. Since then, he had managed to scrape by, trading his skills as a medic and engineer for food and supplies. But resources were always scarce, and when you were one of the few off-worlders on a planet overrun by desperate people, it was easy to become a target. Ethan's situation had worsened when he ran out of rations. For days, he'd been surviving on the little food he could forage, using the last of his water reserves and the emergency supplies he had scavenged from his crashed ship. But as the days passed, hope began to fade. The makeshift camp he had found shelter in was on the outskirts of what had once been a vibrant city. The people there were suspicious of outsiders, and with good reason. The Vekr had seen humans as a threat, and though some had welcomed Ethan as a medic, most saw him as just another opportunist. It was a late afternoon when he found her. A small Vekr child, barely older than 6, was sitting by a dilapidated wall. She was thin, her green skin nearly gray from hunger, and her eyes were wide with fear. Her clothes were ragged, and she clutched a small, battered doll to her chest. Ethan noticed that she was staring at a pile of discarded rations, and as he approached her, she didn't react, her gaze fixed on the food. "Hey there," Ethan said gently, kneeling down in front of her. His heart went out to her. She looked as if she hadn't eaten in days. "Are you okay? Are you hungry?" The girl didn't respond at first, but her eyes flickered up to him, and he saw the fear in her gaze. Her fingers twitched around the doll she held. You not take it," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan frowned. He wasn't sure what she meant, but his instincts told him to be cautious. The Vekr were proud, and they had a deep sense of honor. To them, survival was about pride and strength, and any show of weakness was seen as a liability. But Ethan had nothing to offer her but the one thing he had left, his last ration of food. "Here," he said, taking out the sealed ration packet he had been saving. "You can have this. I don't need it. You look like you could use something to eat." The girl blinked at the ration, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might take it. But then, something happened that he didn't expect. The girl reached out, took the packet in her hands, and looked at it. Then, to Ethan's shock, she simply threw it aside. It landed in the dirt, the packet now covered in dust and grime. She looked back up at him with the same fearful expression, but her eyes were empty, distant. "You don't want it?" Ethan asked, bewildered. He had seen people do many things in his life, but this was different. "I thought. You were hungry?" The girl's small face crumpled as she lowered her head. "Not hungry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's too much." Ethan stared at her for a long moment, confusion gnawing at his mind. "Too much?" he asked, crouching down so they were eye level. "But you need food, don't you?" The girl nodded slowly, her eyes looking down at the ration she had discarded. "Not food," she said. Not like you have." Ethan's eyes widened as he began to understand. She wasn't refusing food. She wasn't refusing sustenance. She was refusing human food. The Vekr, unlike humans, had different nutritional needs. They didn't just need food, they needed something more. The Vekr survived on a diet of special plants and organic matter found only on their planet. Plants that humans couldn't eat without severe side effects. Ethan's rations, though edible for a human, were useless to her. She could not consume what he had given her, and that realization hit him hard. "All right," he said slowly, standing up. "I see. You need your own food. But I don't know where to find that." "I'm sorry, little one." The girl didn't respond. She simply hugged her doll tightly, looking down at the discarded ration as if it meant nothing to her. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the other side of the camp, breaking the silence. Ethan turned his head, alert, as a group of scavengers began making their way through the camp, yelling at each other. One of them shouted something about outsiders and waste. Ethan knew he had to move fast. His rations were gone, and if the scavengers found him, they wouldn't hesitate to take whatever supplies they could. "Hey," he said to the girl, his voice low but firm. "I have to go. You stay here, okay? I'll try to find something else." But before he could turn, the girl's small hand grasped his arm, her fingers cold. Her eyes locked onto his with an intensity he hadn't expected from someone so small. "You help me?" she whispered. "You stay." Ethan hesitated, unsure of how much help he could be. But then he remembered his own struggles, his own desperation when he had nothing left. This little girl, alone in the middle of this wreckage, was showing him the same fear he had felt before. And maybe, just maybe, he could help her. "All right," Ethan said softly, crouching down again. "I'll stay. We'll find something. Together." As he sat down beside her, the scavengers moved past, too distracted by their own needs to notice the quiet pair in the corner. Ethan's heart was heavy and his body exhausted. He didn't have much to offer, but what he could give, he would. Days passed, and Nathan managed to find more food in the debris, a few scraps and plant material that the girl could eat. Slowly, they both built a fragile trust. Though they were from two completely different worlds, two races so far apart in their origins and experiences, they found a quiet companionship in each other's presence. And as the weeks went on, Ethan learned more about the girl. She was an orphan, her parents lost in the wars that had torn apart Drathis, and she had nothing left but her doll and the remnants of a world that no longer existed. As the story unfolded, Ethan's survival skills became more valuable to the camp. The girl's health improved, and together, they were able to carve out a little space for themselves in the ruins of Drathis. One day, as the sun dipped low behind the jagged peaks, the girl looked at Ethan, her small hands clutching the doll tightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "You saved me. You didn't throw me away." Ethan smiled, a feeling of warmth spreading through him that he hadn't known in a long time. "You're not trash," he replied. "You never were." Though they both knew their time on Drathis was limited, and that the planet's future was uncertain, they found something precious in each other's company: survival, hope, and the simple bond between two souls, so different yet so alike in their need for connection. And as the stars twinkled above them, Ethan realized that sometimes the greatest rewards in life weren't in the things we could give, but in the bonds we forged in the most unexpected of places. "You said